Good morning, everyone. I hope your day is starting off as fantastic as it can. In this video, I'm going to explain to you how Danielle Smith has made it obvious that she prefers that Mark Carney and the Liberals have won the federal election, and how she actively worked to sabotage Pierre Poilievre's chances of winning, achieving her preferred result. We're going to watch a portion of an interview that she did with David Cochrane of the CBC on the night of the election, and I'm going to translate her political speak into something that we can understand. I'm going to give you an analysis that you won't find on any other channel. You won't find on any echo chamber where they only spin the information to target the echo chamber they're in so that their viewers will accept it and just nod. Let's listen to this interview, and I want you to remember and contrast her demeanor and her words now, as the election is over and she's being interviewed, to what she was doing during the election. Okay, let's start.
A lot of talk about energy corridors. There seems to be alignment at the First Minister's table. Are you not in any way more optimistic that your natural resources can find easier paths to market and you can get better cooperation with the federal government than you've had in the last 9 years?
Well, I always live in hope, but you saw...
Did you see her smile there right before she answered? Smiling, I always live in hope. Coming from the Premier that with 2 weeks left in the election campaign, made a point of making an announcement that she would facilitate a referendum on separation should the Conservatives lose. Okay? Now she's, well, I always live in hope. A complete reversal. Let's keep going, and then I'll do a more detailed analysis.
Well, I always live in hope, but you saw that the Bloc Québécois' first move is to say they'd partner with Mark Carney as long as he didn't build pipelines. And so that's what I'm signaling is that...
Did you hear what she just said there? She knows the Bloc Québécois' first move was they would partner with Mark Carney provided they don't build pipelines. She knows that the whole issue of pipelines is toxic in Quebec. Pierre Poilievre was trying to get votes in Quebec.
I think what's good for the country is to listen to what the premiers have all said, to listen to what the people of Canada have said. And there's an unprecedented opportunity for us right now to build those new pipelines so that we have market access to the east, to build north so that we can potentially not only protect our Arctic, but also find a new route over to Europe. And yeah, we should be talking about building to the east so that our friends in Ontario and Quebec are not overly reliant on American supply of oil and gas for their needs.
Hopefully now we can build more pipelines to the north, to the east, to our friends in Ontario and Quebec. Now they're friends, but I'm going to point out here, and I'll explain, there won't be any new pipelines built in the next 4 years in Canada, okay? There will not, and I will explain why later in the video.
And I know you mentioned Mr. Blanchet, and while he is an important voice in Quebec...
Mr. Blanchet is the guy who ran federally and got 22 seats in the federal government.
He does not hold actual political power in Quebec, you know, Mr. Legault.
Mr. Legault is the Premier of Quebec.
Has also expressed an openness, an increased openness to consider these things. So you're going to have a challenge with Quebec no matter who is in the Prime Minister's office, even if Mr. Poilievre won, because social license there is harder to achieve when it comes to an oil and gas pipeline. So, I mean, is it really Mr. Blanchet at 22 seats with Mark Carney only needing 3 votes in a parliament like this to get any kind of energy corridor legislation passed? Is the Bloc really an obstacle here if the Premier of Quebec is willing to talk to the Prime Minister of Canada and the Premier of Alberta and see if there's a compromise?
That's an excellent question. I'll listen to her answer.
I just hope that he doesn't create an unholy alliance with any of the political parties that are opposed to building out economic corridors. And I think that the NDP has staked out certain ground, as have the Greens and as have the Bloc. And so I don't know how he's going to run Parliament. Sometimes there are formal coalitions. Sometimes there's just agreement on votes on an issue-by-issue basis. This would probably be the time right now to see all of the areas that we can find consensus on and move forward. And I make the argument, I was just out in Quebec recently. I want to do more business with Quebec. I was meeting with business leaders to find out how we might be able to buy more from Quebec and how Quebec might be able to buy more from us. Because I think that that's another conversation that has opened up. Let's find new markets. Let's find more ways to trade with each other. And let's hope that this spirit of cooperation extends into this new parliament.
Wow.
Well, you say you want to do more business with Quebec, but as a final point, there's a lot of suspicion that you might want to be a little bit more like Quebec. And when people like Preston Manning were talking about a Liberal win, maybe, exacerbating the idea of Alberta separatism. I just wonder what your thoughts are on that. I mean, is this something you would forcefully push back against as the First Minister of Alberta, the notion that because the national election didn't go the way a lot of people in your province wanted, that it becomes a cause for separation?
Well, I have always said that I support Alberta sovereignty within a united Canada, and I think that is the viewpoint of many of the premiers, is that they want the Constitution to be respected. They want to be able to have local decision making. They want the environmental process to be at the provincial level. So I'm not alone in that. We have a process in our province where you have citizen-initiated referenda. If you have a certain number of signatures on a petition, issues can be put forward. If there is an appetite for that kind of conversation, that would be the avenue for it. But it's not something that our government would be putting forward. I believe that we've got to try to be on Team Canada, but my view has always been that Team Canada has to show that they're on Team Alberta too.
I'm not for separation. This is something that the Alberta citizens have a right to bring forward a motion if they want to have a referendum, but I'm on Team Canada. This is a perfect interview. She did a fantastic job in this interview. She sounds like a moderate. She sounds intelligent. She answered all the questions very respectfully. This is a 10 out of 10 performance in this interview. The point is, it's the exact opposite of what she did during the election campaign. During the election campaign, with 2 weeks left to go, she made a point of saying that she would facilitate this process for Alberta citizens to propose in a referendum Alberta separating. Why would you talk about that during the election? It was one of the biggest issues that was used by the Liberals in Quebec and Atlantic Canada and Ontario. She's not an unintelligent woman. She's calculated and she knows exactly what she's saying. Do you remember what she was saying during the federal election campaign? When she decided to go to the United States and appear on a show with Ben Shapiro, knowing that that would not play over well at all in Ontario and Quebec and Atlantic Canada. When she went on the Brett Bart show in the United States and she said the perspective that Pierre would bring would be very much in sync with the new direction in America, linking Pierre Poilievre to Donald Trump, which caused him no end of grief. He couldn't shake it for the rest of the election. This was the issue that lost the election for the Conservatives in Quebec, in Atlantic Canada, and most of Ontario. It was the perception that the Conservatives, led by Pierre Poilievre, were more aligned and in sync with Donald Trump. They couldn't shake that, and she brought it to the forefront. And Pierre Poilievre was asked endless questions about, do you agree with Danielle Smith? Do you agree with what she said? And he was boxed in and had to sidestep those questions. Remember, if you're from Alberta and Saskatchewan, you probably never even heard of this. But in Quebec, in Atlantic Canada, and in most of the heavily populated areas in Ontario, this was death for Pierre Poilievre. And she's not an unintelligent person. And I propose that this was a very calculated performance by the Premier of Alberta to try and sabotage Pierre Poilievre in this election and try and increase the chances for the Liberals to win the election. And there's a couple of possibilities of why she did this. Now, I mentioned that there would probably be no major pipelines built in Canada in the next 4 years, and I misspoke. What I meant to say was there will be no privately funded pipelines built, major pipelines built in Canada in the next 4 years. And I'm going to explain why. This is a graph of oil prices, guys, over time. There's two colors on the graph. Green is West Texas Intermediate, the most widely quoted price. And blue is Western Canada Select, a heavier grade of oil, which trades at a discount to West Texas Intermediate. And you can look here. Can we actually expand this? So that we only see a portion of this. Let's see. Oh, we can. Look at that. This is beautiful. You can see WTI in, April 1st, 2021 was $61.71. Western Canadian Select heavy oil from Alberta is $50. It's about a $10 spread there. This spread goes anywhere between $10 and $20 here. And now the latest number they have on this graph is January and March 1st, 2025, $68 WTI. And Western Canada Select 54, about a $15 spread. Oil prices today are like $60, minus 15. Western Canadian oil is $45, okay? There's no private company that's going to build a pipeline with oil prices, Western Canada oil prices at $45. The only way a major pipeline project will get built in Canada with these kind of oil prices is if the federal government pays for it. Now, a lot of people don't even understand how pipelines get built, okay? Oil companies don't build pipelines. Let me explain it. It's important to understand this. It might make the video longer, but let me explain this. Pipeline companies build pipelines. And the way they do that, if it's a major pipeline, small pipelines are easier to build, and they're usually built to connect production to facilities. And that's easy. But when you're going to build a major arterial pipeline that may cost tens or fives of billions of dollars, a pipeline company needs, before it invests that money, to have the assurance that they can fill that pipeline. Because a private pipeline company risks the capital to build the pipeline in the first place. Now, the pipeline company over time will recoup its initial investment and earn an acceptable rate of return by charging a transportation fee on the product that goes through its pipeline. That transportation fee is usually paid by the producers, the sellers of the product. Sometimes they negotiate with the purchasers. So you can actually discount that Western Canadian Select price even a little bit lower because there's a transportation cost in there, usually paid for by the producers. Once a pipeline is built and operational, it generates quite a bit of income. And these companies that build pipelines are known as utility type companies. And incidentally, the pipeline that the Liberal government built, the Trans Mountain Expansion Pipeline, is now an asset owned by the federal government and is generating quite a bit of revenue. It's not simply an expenditure. Right now, that is an asset that owned by the federal government that's going to generate income for decades. So why would a pipeline company risk $10, $20 billion to build a major pipeline project like connecting Alberta to New Brunswick? Why would they spend that money? Well, they have to have assurance before they invest the money that that pipeline can be filled with product so that they can charge the fees. And a major pipeline like that may carry 1 or 2 million barrels a day. And the only way they can have assurance of having that product, they're not going to displace product from other pipelines, right? There's already oil traveling around in the pipeline system that we have now. The only way a project like this will proceed is if there's a major escalation in production in Alberta. And the only way there'll be a major escalation in production in Alberta, it's not going to happen by drilling a few conventional oil wells. In Alberta, to get that kind of production increase is going to require an expansion of the oil sands, right? A new 1 million or 2 million barrel a day expansion in oil sands production. And for an oil company to do that, they need assurance that they're going to get their return, and they have to have an expectation that oil prices will be at a level where that will be profitable. And also an expectation that there will be a pipeline ready when their new production comes online. And the key player that will have to coordinate the whole thing will have to be the federal government, because they're in charge of the whole approval process. And they will have to step in as kind of the entity that de-risks the project and gives the confidence to both the oil companies and the pipeline companies that this will proceed. And it may be that the federal government will have to pay for the pipeline or in some way be involved with funding it, maybe in a partnership or in some sort of an arrangement. This is very complicated, but I assure you a project of this magnitude will not just proceed just because someone says, oh yeah, we should build a pipeline. This whole thing is very complicated, and it's going to need a coordinated effort between industry and government. And just to put it in perspective, the Trans Mountain Expansion that was just completed recently, connecting Edmonton to Vancouver basically, was so expensive. It cost $38 billion. And I know there'll be some conservatives that are watching this video go, well, the only reason it costs that much is because of environmental approvals and all the BS that the Liberals introduced. And it was a real mistake for the Liberals to buy that pipeline. And the private sector could have done it a lot cheaper. And of course, that's a fairy tale. And the reason that Kinder Morgan stopped pursuing to build that project was, number one, was because it was becoming apparent that they may not get approval, mainly because of the opposition of the British Columbia government. The then Premier Horgan was dead set against having the pipeline go forward. And also, they started getting cost estimates, and they realized that this thing was going to cost a lot more than the $4 to $7 billion that they were planning on. How could it be that expensive? Does that make sense? Well, let me show you why. Here we are on Google Maps hovering over the city of Edmonton. Let's go from Edmonton to Winnipeg. Okay, guys? Let's see what the map looks like if you go from Edmonton to Winnipeg. Oh, look at that. If you want to go from Edmonton to Winnipeg, it's a 13-hour drive. And if you want to build a pipeline between Edmonton and Winnipeg, I bet it would only cost about $2 billion. Why? Have you ever driven this? This is flat-ass prairie. All you need is a really big backhoe that drives along and scoops the earth, flips the earth open, put the pipeline in, close it back up. This would be one of the easiest pipelines to build in the world. What happens if you want to go from Edmonton to Vancouver? Whoa, that's about the same distance. It's a 12.5-hour drive. But guys, this pipeline crosses the largest mountain range in the world, okay? If you zoom in here and see what this pipeline had to cross, the Rocky Mountains, it had to cross and wind its way and burrow its way through, not soil that you could flip over with a backhoe, burrow through mountains. It had to cross major river valleys that flood when all the snow from these mountains that you see in this picture melts and rushes down these valleys, huge torrents, 100 feet deep. Somehow that pipeline had to get burrowed underneath in solid rock where it would be safe. This was a world-class engineering marvel, and the reason it cost $38 billion has nothing to do with liberals or conservatives. It has to do with this thing was really hard to build. And if you're an engineer and you're looking at this, you're probably going, yeah, that looks like it would be a tough one. Also, the federal government understood what a precarious situation this was because, as I mentioned, a pipeline company won't even start to invest this kind of capital unless they're assured that there will be production there to fill the pipeline. And there was production there ready to fill a major pipeline. If Kinder Morgan backed out, there would have been a lot of stranded production in Alberta, having to be shipped out by rail. It would have really there would have been a lot of stranded resources if this project stopped. So the federal government stepped in and took over the project and completed the pipeline. And now I'm going to give you the type of political analysis that you won't hear on any other channel. I'm going to convert the political speak that you just heard from Danielle in that interview into real information. Now, she's smart and she knows that being adversarial with Ottawa is a political plus for her. So no question, for her own selfish gain, it's more advantageous for her to have a liberal government in Ottawa. So she can continue to fight with that federal government and gain popularity within Alberta for doing it. Did you see how she answered these questions on how she wants to work with her friends in Alberta and her friends in Quebec? And it doesn't matter what political stripe you're from, there's more of an appetite for these infrastructure programs, and how such a beautiful interview that she gave, which she could have done any time during the campaign. And an interview like this, appearing moderate and very thoughtful and very intelligent, would have been spectacular for Pierre Poilievre. It would have lessened the fear that everyone had of voting for a conservative. Instead, she used her political capital during the campaign, pointing out how Pierre Poilievre was more aligned with the Americans, and she went on those shows in the US. And she can afford to expend that political capital in Alberta because it doesn't hurt her in Alberta. But she knew full well that it would really hurt Pierre Poilievre. So let's analyze this even deeper, and you have to have a big brain to do this. Luckily, I have a big brain. When it comes to pipelines, I really believe that she wants pipeline expansion for Alberta. How is she going to get that pipeline expansion? If she helped Pierre Poilievre win, I would propose that there would be virtually no chance of a major Canadian national energy transmission project to be built. For the reasons that I gave, oil prices are too low, and there is no private transportation pipeline company that would be willing to take the risk on a project that size. Private pipeline companies will take the risk of a $100 million project and a $200 million project and maybe a $1 billion project, but they certainly would not take a risk on a project across the whole country that might cost $10 billion. So if you know anything about the economy and economics, and I tried to explain it briefly in the interlude here to this video, there's virtually no chance that a private company is going to build a project of that magnitude in Canada right now, especially with the chaos and turmoil that we're in with the United States as far as tariffs and trade and whether we're going to go into a recession, and so much uncertainty. No private company is going to put up that or risk that amount of capital. So that's number one. Number two, if she helped Pierre Poilievre win, the other possible outcome is, well, will the federal government build this? No, the Conservatives would not. That's against the conservative principle. So if she helped Pierre Poilievre win, there would be a zero chance of a new major pipeline being built because the Conservatives would not pay for it. They're all about capitalism and private investment, and the government does not want to get involved in that kind of project. And a project is too big for a private company to take on. 0% chance of it happening if the Conservatives won. And in the circumstance that Pierre Poilievre wins the election and no pipeline gets built, would she gain popularity by fighting with the federal government, by fighting a fellow conservative? No. So there was no upside for her personally to see Pierre Poilievre as the prime minister. Now, on the other hand, Mark Carney is a win-win for her because the two scenarios, number one, if no pipeline gets built, private companies aren't going to build it. And if the Liberals don't step in, it won't get built. So in the condition that pipelines don't get built, she gets to blame it on Ottawa because those damn Liberals, she's going to gain popularity by just saying, there the Liberals go again. We can't get a pipeline built. So she wins if there's no pipeline. And on the other hand, the Liberals are the most likely to actually step in and build the pipeline with government money. So she wins either way with the Liberals in power. Do you see? It's a win-win for her to have a Liberal government because if they don't build a pipeline, she gains popularity. And if the Liberal government itself pays for the pipeline and builds it, then she could say, see, I facilitated this. Alberta is growing. I was a strong premier and I made demands of Mark Carney and he listened to me and I got the pipeline built. She played this perfectly. She completely bamboozled the federal Conservatives. And remember, she's a provincial Conservative. She was not running in this election, but she won. All right. The federal Conservatives don't even know that she did it. It was an absolute brilliant move. And I know that some of you are thinking this. There might still be some conservative viewers watching this video. You might be thinking that's preposterous. She would never turn her back on her own kind and throw her own party under the bus. She wouldn't do that, would she? Guys, she's already done this in the past. She threw her own party under the bus, the party that she was the leader of. Back in 2014, there she is, a younger Danielle Smith. And the story in 2014, the big shock story in 2014 was when Danielle Smith, the leader of the Wild Rose Party in Alberta, her and half her members turned their backs on their own party. All her supporters, all the voters that helped her build that party, she was the leader of the Wild Rose Party, and she turned her back on all of them, crossed the floor to join the then Conservatives, who were led by Jim Prentice, because she realized that in an upcoming election, the Wild Rose Party did not have enough votes to form the government. And she wanted power so badly that she crossed the floor. The biggest act of traitorism in politics, when you just turn your back on your party and you switch sides. That's what she did. And this was the shocking headline in 2014. It hit political news like a slap in the face. Alberta Premier Jim Prentice and former Wild Rose leader Danielle Smith speak to the media after a caucus meeting in Edmonton on Wednesday. Prentice's caucus met to discuss a bid by at least half of the official opposition to cross the floor. The official opposition in Alberta at the time was the Wild Rose Party, with their leader Danielle Smith leading the defections and traitorously leaving and abandoning the party. She's done it before. She's a shrewd, calculating politician that has nothing but her own advancement in mind, and she played the federal Conservative Party like a fiddle. She got exactly the outcome that she wanted, and I would not be surprised in the future, and maybe even in the not-so-distant future, she may have plans to try and win the leadership of the federal Conservative Party. If this Liberal government under Mark Carney, in cooperation with Alberta and all the way into the Maritimes to New Brunswick, agree and start construction of an East-West Canada infrastructure pipeline project, she will take credit. She will be a Conservative star. And when Liberal fortunes fade and the Conservatives are looking for a new leader to lead them to victory, there's a good chance that Danielle Smith will try and take control federally. So have you ever heard any deep political analysis like you've just heard today on this channel? Probably not, because most of the media outlets and podcasters will want to spin the message so that it resonates with their own echo chamber. A conservative wouldn't dare accuse a fellow conservative of having a secret plan. But translating her political speak, the contrast between during the election to after the election, the change in demeanor, the change in her answers, the smile before she says, well, I'm always an optimist. You have to understand how to translate political speak into what they're actually doing. And that's why my analysis is always so bang on and I'm right about everything. You can buy yourself a hat that says Klaus Kellerman was right about everything. I'm interested in what you guys think, all right? There might be some interesting comments in the comments section. Subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying the content. Consider becoming a channel member if you want to support me here. I'll keep doing videos because you won't get this kind of political analysis anywhere else. These kind of ideas. It's just our ecosystem and our media structure don't allow it when the channels get big. And my promise to you is that I will never just try and fit into one echo chamber. I'm going to say things that are going to upset conservatives. I'm going to say things that are going to upset liberals, like I did recently when I pointed out the potential for the liberals to get the 7 NDP to cross the floor to give them a majority. If you haven't watched that video, watch it. That could happen in the next 2-3 weeks. Anyways, I will read your comments. And I will catch you guys on the next one.